Hello, I go by Crycat, and over the past year I've delved deeply into the storytelling potential of Risk of Rain. Through a series of short films based off the game, I've been able to connect with a passionate audience surrounding Risk of Rain, accumulating over 450,000 views. These projects have not only received praise from the community, but have also inspired new players to discover and purchase the game. I'm reaching out and writing this letter because I believe Risk of Rain has untapped potential as a TV series. Its rich world building, diverse characters, and atmospheric tone are perfect for episodic storytelling, and I would love to collaborate with the team to make this a reality. To demonstrate my commitment, I've written a 24-minute screenplay for a pilot episode, which serves as the foundation for a planned 10-episode series. This series explores 8 survivors delving into their struggles, growth, and the mystery of the planet they find themselves on. The screenplay is linked below. A high-quality adaptation streamed on a major platform could significantly enhance the Risk of Rain IP, reaching new audiences while celebrating what fans love about the franchise. I would be able to bring in creative direction and a deep understanding of the game's themes and characters. And through making my mini-series, I've heard many opinions about what people like and dislike in a series. My portfolio, along with the talented collaborators behind the previous films, is linked below. I'm confident that we could bring this project to life in a new way that honors the game and brings in new players around the world. Thanks for reading. I hope you'll be in touch. Let's talk about Risk of Rain. Part 1 is I'm going to be introducing you to the structure of Risk of Rain as a story in itself if you think about it. You're flung into an unfamiliar world where the environment gets more and more hostile, challenging you along the way. And then you fight God. So, honestly, the perfect end to any story. You're already playing the game in little episodes. Each stage is a new story waiting to be experienced. What environments will you have to brave? What items will you find? What friends will you lose? And how close will you come to death? Part 2, gonna talk about the characters, silly little guys. The survivors in Risk of Rain 2 are very stereotypical for the most part. A soldier, a hunter, an engineer, a samurai. And most of them can be described in a single word. And if not, they have, like, a deal. Like, you know this guy gets up to some heinous shit. The fact that each survivor has their own thing makes them fun to play, but it also makes them fun to write. Having a world to connect these characters to makes it really accessible to write interesting stories for them. And the community has already assigned, personalities to most of the survivors. Giving these characters an arc would be very easy in the environment of Risk of Rain. Petrichor 5 is basically a war zone, so the potential for hardships, loss, and triumph are immediately evident. Spoilers for Petrichor 5 ahead. I'm going to be talking about my plan for the middle of the show, you know, the meat. None of this has been written yet, so it's mostly just rough planning and ideas that live inside my brain like a brainworm. I get them out. In my version of the story, the survivors would be separated when they descend to the planet. They split up into groups, and here are the groups I had planned. Commando and Bandit, Captain, Huntress, and Engineer, Loader and Mercenary, and finally Multi and Rex. Starting with Commando and Bandit, I put them together because of their opposing personalities. Commando is set up to be a rule follower who wants to complete the mission and stay under the radar. Meanwhile, Bandit's here for the treasure and the glory, aka he don't be following no rules. Moving on to the second group, Captain, Huntress, and Engineer. In my canon, Captain is Huntress's grandfather. Crazy, I know. And putting family members together is automatically just a recipe for disaster, especially on Petrichor 5. Like, what if Captain has to choose between Engineer and Huntress? What if Huntress gets too eager and gets herself in a tough spot? Now, Loader and Mercenary are interesting because they both have hang-ups on the planet. Loader lost her sister on the contact light, and Mercenary was the only survivor of the contact light. So they both have kind of this pre-established beef with the planet, you know? Oh, you want to know about Rex and Multi? No, that one's a secret. Part 3, we're gonna construct that world, we're gonna build it like Bob the Builder. So if you've seen Risk of Rain, you know about the absolutely beautiful environments, from a hanging garden to a hellish underground to an arid desert. I mean, all of the concept art is done for us. All that would need to be concepted is the beginning when they're not on the planet yet. But I've already done a bit of that. Wink, 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 wink. Here's the best story I've ever come up with, Cat on Bench Eats Lettuce. My storytelling approach would be very similar to my shorts. Each scene would focus on a different survivor, and tell an individual story to develop or influence their decision-making in some sort of way. To simplify it, in let's say a 10-episode series, here's an outline on how I would imagine doing it. Episode 1 and 2 would be basic character introductions and entering the planet. Episode 3, we would see the first two groups begin their hardships and learn what their enemies are. Episode 4, we see the other two groups begin their hardships and do the same thing. Episode 5 and 6, each group experiences the meat of their story, the middle of their arcs. Episode 7 and 8, individual plotlines would transition into a finale, and Episode 9 would be the finale, and Episode 10 would be the aftermath and the ending. This format allows time for each character while also keeping a majority of the series on the planet. Because let's be honest, that's what people really want to see. Now I know how controversial this is going to be, but I think the composer should not be Chris Christodoulou. No, don't worry, I know, I love him, he's great. But I think a different composer would add some new spice and feel to the world. And I'm pretty sure Chris wants to move on from Risk of Rain as well, and I'd like to respect that. Now, my personal dream composer would be Kevin Penkin, not only because he's my favorite composer, but he also has a record of producing tracks that perfectly encapsulate being in a foreign land. Here's a little snippet of his music. For visuals, as I've already mentioned, we already have the base for almost every design we'll need for the planet. Most of the concept work will be the first 2 episodes where they aren't on the planet. The same goes for the 3D models. There are already good bases for modelers which could cut down on the need to concept them. As I've shown in the beginning animation, I think a dark, gritty, and textured style would benefit this series a lot, as that would match the feel of the world. What the freak are you expecting, you dingus? Honestly, not much. I'm not going to get through my entire idea for this series on my own, so the only way to see it fully realized is to garner the support of those who are making it. And I'm dead serious. I would continue self-producing this for however long it takes if I were compensated enough for that to be feasible. And as I said before, the full screenplay is in the description. It's basically just a compilation of all the shorts, but there's some extra scenes in there. So, Gearbox, if you're listening, let's talk.